Good evening and welcome to part 2 of our 3-part town hall series entitled Heavy Industry and the Food We Eat. Over the past several weeks, since our last town hall in May, a lot has transpired. Most importantly, we're relieved by reports from many residents on St. Croix that they are breathing a little easier as the urgency of the emissions crises, which were the impetus for this entire series, have subsided. I also want to take a moment out to offer a special acknowledgement to EPA Administrator Michael Regan. Thank you for listening and thank you for leading. Without question, there is still much to be discussed and much work to be done to ensure that our people stay safe, that all of our people who live downwind and those who live upwind from St. Croix industrial complex have equal opportunity to breathe clean air, equal access to safe food and clean drinking water, and equal opportunity to safe, gainful employment. During our last town hall, much of the focus was on air quality. Tonight, we'll be delving into the issues surrounding our land and sea and the impact heavy industry has had on our natural environment here on St. Croix. Additionally, with the recognition that in some of the most sustainable and resilient societies, there are 3 specific professionals that are held in the highest esteem, we have invited some important community voices to our virtual table to lead tonight's conversation. They are our local farmers who feed our bodies, the educators who sow our intellect, and the griots and historians who cultivate our cultural consciousness and record our story. Of course, we have created space in the forum for our residents who are the real VIP guests for tonight's town hall. But first, to provide some context for this evening's conversation, I think it's important to note that when we first began planning this series, it was also a singular intention of ours to create a forum and a platform through which we would try to provide residents answers to pressing questions about the ways in which their lives, their health, and their properties were being impacted by an urgent environmental crisis. We especially wanted to demonstrate to the people who were suffering and felt there weren't sufficient reactions or there wasn't sufficient compassion that we were listening and creating space for their voices to be heard. Also, because most of the residents of St. Croix have been here before dealing with long-standing environmental impacts from our industrial complex, from red dust, chemical and oil emissions, and black mold. At the very outset of our planning, we decided to expand our focus to not just evaluate and interrogate the present circumstances, but to also be reflective in order to gain a deeper understanding of how we got here, what decisions were made 60 years ago that put us on this trajectory for good or for bad, with the ultimate goal being to assess what lessons need to be learned for the future. Also, because of our deepening partnership with our nonprofits and because of our collective prioritization of community resilience, sustainability, and self-sufficiency, coupled with significant investments in agriculture following the 2017 hurricanes, the foundation and our partners also decided to dedicate one segment of our town hall series exclusively to farmers and fishers. Living on a small, geographically isolated Caribbean island, we oftentimes seem to forget that our story is not unique, that the systems that informed our economic development path were very closely tied to the same systems that compromised communities of color across the US, with the impact of those decisions placing disproportionate burden on our health and our welfare. Before I turn over the mic to my partners, I want to tee up tonight's first conversation between Olassie Davis and David Bond. As with most Crucians, I have such incredible reverence for Olassie Davis as a community treasure and one of the most vocal and passionate voices for land and water conservation and stewardship. And then we have our new friend, David Bond, who we met almost 3 years ago. I actually first came to know about David while doing some late night research around the evolution of oil in the Caribbean and came across a research paper he had written about St. Croix. In fact, I was about 35,000 feet above the earth on a flight back to St. Croix when I first decided to read David's thesis and literally had to put it down until I landed because it engendered such incredible rage and confusion about how a professor from Vermont knew more about my story than I did. we immediately reached out to David and invited him to attend our environmental forum, which the foundation hosted back in 2019. Over the past several weeks, David has been sharing his research with a larger Virgin Islands audience through a climactic 6-part editorial series, which is being published in the VI source. Then immediately following the first segment of our town hall, we will hear from some of the real protagonists of our Croix story, our farmers, who have stood on the front lines of St. Croix' generations-long fight for self-determination and self-sufficiency before we open up the forum to the community. In closing, I want to take a minute to say that while there have admittedly been some voices, a few, not many, in the community who have raised questions about why St. Croix Foundation is hosting these town halls, why this issue, why now? I want to quickly answer those questions by very simply stating for the record that there is no subterfuge or hidden agenda in our why. We have done our work to prepare for this conversation along with our civic partners, and not just the environmental nonprofits here tonight who represent only one of 4 sectors in our nonprofit consortium. For 5 years, we have engaged and listened to our community. We have conducted intensive research around sustainable and progressive economic development models, and we have adjoined our mission in a collective commitment to economic, racial, and environmental equity. If there is any agenda we seek to advance through this forum, it actually has very little to do with the refinery or any heavy industrial site. Our focus is centered in community empowerment. It's centered in civic courage and accountable governance, and it's centered in sound stewardship of our natural resources. I think I can speak for my team and for these amazing civic soldiers I am sharing this virtual stage with tonight in saying that we are resolute, we are relentless, we are unyielding, and we are unafraid of a little resistance or opposition in our fight for justice and for equity. Although we exist in a hyper-punitive political environment where the right to disagree, to dissent, and to disrupt the status quo is sometimes punished, I am honored to hold this space for those who are afraid or unable to speak. We serve for them. And I want to thank everyone once again for joining us tonight. Jen, I'm turning the mic over to you.
Thank you, Deanna. That was amazing. So good evening. I'm Jen Balulis, the Executive Director of the St. Croix Environmental Association. Welcome to all panelists and guests. I'm looking forward to a really interesting discussion tonight. In our previous town hall in May, we asked questions about the immediate issues and effects on our community from the refinery's operations. We were facing noxious fumes, oil raining into our community, fire and flares, all acute impacts. This town hall discussion connected the community with regulatory officials and experts and gave all of us a better understanding of the situation. Fortunately, we've had some relief from these impacts from the refinery, at least temporarily, thanks to all of you that spoke up about your experiences. In this town hall today, we examine the impacts of heavy industry on our food systems. Food security is key to survival and the independence of our community. Healthy fisheries and productive agriculture are the foundation. As we look forward to the future of St. Croix, agriculture and the blue economy, which includes fisheries, are sectors where St. Croix can thrive and with which we can build our economy, as recognized in the Vision 2040 plan developed by the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority this year. But there are key elements that are necessary for agriculture and fisheries to succeed, such as clean water, clean air, and healthy soil. So it is important to examine the factors that might have adverse impacts on these elements. Today is an opportunity to do this. I am grateful to the panelists for joining us today to share their knowledge and experience and to answer questions posed by our community. I am also grateful to all of the attendees in the audience that are listening, considering, asking questions, and discussing. This is how we build a strong, healthy community together. Thank you, and on to Frandel.
Good evening, and thank you, Deanna, for a great opening, and Jennifer for couching all of this. I'm Fran Del Gerard. I'll serve as the moderator this evening. For those of you in the audience, we ask you to please put your questions and answers in the questions in the Q&A so that we can address them. We are grateful to be here, honored that our elders have sanctioned this convening, and looking forward to breaking new ground. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. David Bond. He's a faculty member at Bennington College, and Mr. Lassie Davis, the Bushman from the University of the Virgin Islands, and Virgin Islander, for this next section of our talk. We're going to engage in conversation for about 20 minutes before we go to the next section. And when Summer Sibley Brown will host a conversation with two farmers from St. Croix. So Dr. Bond, David, and Olassie, welcome and thank you. I am going to ask you, David, if you could please speak to your current series in the St. Croix source, which explores the three moments in St. Croix's history during the last century: Bicorp, Harvey Aluminum, and Hess Oil. It investigates the industrialization of St. Croix and the decimation of the agricultural industry. What prompted your interest in St. Croix and heavy industry?
Well, thank you, Frandel, and thank you, Deanna, and others for the invitation to be here. I'm honored and delighted to be here. I was on St. Croix about a decade ago trying to understand the place of oil refineries in the wider Caribbean, and ended up writing an essay about the place of oil refining, which is a sort of underappreciated place in the making of the contemporary Caribbean. And from that, got really interested in St. Croix, and was delighted to come back and share some of that research. But when I was here a decade ago, I had come across these episodes that I thought were really fascinating, and I didn't quite know how to tell the story until this moment. And it felt like this moment, the source had reached out to me and asked me, with everything going on with Lime Tree, if I'd be willing to write a quick history of the refinery. And as I started to write that, I realized I couldn't write that history without saying something of Harvey Aluminum. And I couldn't write something of Harvey Aluminum without writing something about Vicor. And to me, these, in a way, I feel like sometimes the present seems impossible. And each three of these moments to me were different threads that tied the present up. And so I thought by writing them out and sharing them, there might be ways to think about how to untie the impossibility of the present moment.
We appreciate that. And one of the reactions that I'm hearing from many of my friends as they go through the series is not just pain and anger, but a real sense of disconnect that they didn't know about this. How is it possible that this information was so closely held and withheld from people here in the territory and the world at large?
It's a great question, and it was shocking to me to realize this information was in the headlines of the island papers for 1962, 1963, 1964. These debates were occupying the central real estate of the newspapers, of the conversations. But I think immediately after that moment, very quickly there was a narrative that got put in place that was agriculture died a natural death and industry replaced it. But if you go back to that 1962, 1963, 1964 moment and look at the news in the papers, you see this fierce debate of people taking to the streets of St. Croix again and again in defense of agriculture. And when you start to read through those moments, you realize that agriculture did not die a natural death. Agriculture was murdered. And it was a deliberate policy by the governor to stomp out agriculture, to make way for industry. And the governor did that through a number of things. But in that moment, it's incredibly contested, fraught, debated, and thousands of people flood out into the streets of Frederiksted and Christiansted again and again and again in defense of farming, in defense of agriculture.
Wow. Well, thanks. That got chills going here. You know, you speak about the murder of agriculture, and I think to contextualize it for a lot of people who are in this conversation and on this meeting, what did that look like? I mean, what was happening with farmers at that point, 1959, 60, 61, and you know, how were they successful? Were they becoming landowners? You know, if you could address some of that.
It's a great question, and so there was, you know, the Vicor was founded as a way of remaking the plantation into a kind of publicly funded agriculture, publicly supported agriculture that was distributed into homesteads. So Vicor initially was founded to break up plantations and replace them with homesteads that would sort of be 5 to 10 acre plots of folks growing half of their land in sugar and half of their land in subsistence crops and crops for the local market. By many measures, this was a phenomenally successful plan. It both brought new land into agriculture across St. Croix. It helped pull the entire Virgin Islands out of the Great Depression. It brought new investments into education, healthcare, and infrastructure across the island. And it was successful in sort of lifting the islands out of the Great Depression and building a new base of ingenuity in farming for individuals. I mean, it's an interesting structure that both took, you know, federal money to invest in the public infrastructure of farming, what was needed to farm, but allowed tremendous opportunities for individual ingenuity in actual farming, in how those actual homesteads were organized and run. I say that agriculture was murder, and I don't say that lightly. If you go through that moment and see what happened, the governor decided to sell off all of the Vicor land after Harvey was already on the island. This wasn't a thing that was sort of necessary to bring Harvey on. Harvey's already there. Harvey's already setting up. And the governor decides to sell all of the Vicor land, which is almost 3,000 acres of prime agricultural land. When he announces his plan to sell that, people flood to the street in protest, go to the government house in Christiansted, and the governor tells his deputy, don't answer the door, don't even acknowledge they're out there. And just, you know, it tries to ignore the protests. The Virgin Islands, St. Croix legislators led an effort that was unanimous in the legislature to try to buy the land themselves of Vicor and keep it in the public trust. The governor refused that opportunity. Made the auction for the land, refused the ability of the territory to bid on that land. He also refused proposals to bid it off in smaller sections so that farmers themselves could bid on that land. And so he said at some point he only wanted highly capitalized industries to bid on the land. And what happens when it goes up for sale? Harvey Aluminum, which has no need of 3,000 acres of farmland, buys the land as part of a way of shutting down crushing agriculture. Alongside that, which is the most significant repressive move of the governor against agriculture, you also have the curious fact that the federal office, the sole federal office where farmers can get access to federal aid for agriculture, closes down that year without warning. One day it's open, the next day it's closed. and it shuts off over $1 million a year in federal aid to farmers. Happens that year. Also, after that sale, the governor refuses to zone the center of the island, the prime agricultural land, as agriculture, refuses to set it aside as only used for agriculture, and starts to participate in selling it off for commerce and developments that make it incredibly hard to think about going back to agriculture after that. Those are the three main ways that I see the governor, directing a kind of murder of agriculture. There's a fourth that happens after, and that's pollution. And the fact that pollution from these industries in a way salts the earth of St. Croix, and in different ways makes it incredibly hard to return that earth back to the phenomenal fertility it had and productivity it had before that.
Thank you. And that governor was Governor Isidore Croix, who was an appointed governor, never an elected governor. We appreciate your doing that. I'm going to bring in the Bushman, Olassie Davis. Olassie, as you know, you've done research on the impact of the industrialization of the South Shore, beginning with Harvey Aluminum. And you are an expert in the ecology and culture of these islands. Can you share a little bit about the significance of Croix Lagoon and the effects on the lagoon with the industrial development, and perhaps even share a little bit with us about your knowledge of the early Crucians who fought to preserve that natural environment?
Okay, good evening, everyone. I just want to let you know that I had a class tonight. I had a professor and one of my colleagues take over the class tonight because this forum is very important. And what David mentioned is correct. I wrote an article in the paper, haven't come out yet. It talked about land reform and then going back for the 1930s about agriculture. Now, the Croix Lagoon, the Croix Lagoon was the largest wetland in the Virgin Islands. Historically, the Croix Lagoon, you can walk out almost a quarter mile on the South Shore and people fish. There were so many fish and so many conch. I have documentation where they throw the conch back in the water. So a lot of folk do not understand the Croix Lagoon. One individual understand the Croix Lagoon was George Seaman, who born in 1904. A lot of his research with the Croix Lagoon I have here at my office at UVI. In fact, George Seaman, he was fighting to protect the Croix Lagoon. He was a wildlife biologist that worked for the government at a particular time. He left the island and went to Sabre, and he died bitter because of the destruction of the Croix Lagoon, but overall the environment in the Virgin Islands. He wrote a master plan for the entire Virgin Islands going back in the 1950s, and it was given to the government for conservation purposes, how to protect land throughout the entire Virgin Islands. And the government never listened. So what happened in the 1960s and before that, today I noticed that people in the southern part, the south part of St. Croix, from the refinery going to the west, do not swim at those beach. There's a reason for that. The impact of the Croix Lagoon by the backside company, and then later on, Hess Oil Refinery, it impacted the South Shore, that all the beaches in that part of the island disappear. The best beaches in St. Croix were the South Shore. Today, there's no one swim at the South Shore anymore. All those beaches gone. George Seaman, in his last book called Every Man is a Shadow, talk about it. In 1974, there was a environmental forum put on by the last appointed governor and the first elected governor was Evans. And there's a book called Of a Troubled Environment, Can We Save It? I will not go into it. In that book, they address the Croix Lagoon and the environment overall. Today, had the word Lime Tree. Lime Tree was a beach. Next to Lime Tree, there was Estate King Garden Bay. That's going toward the east. Those beacons being impacted, but not as bad as compared to the west. So you can imagine from the lagoon heading east, those entire beach to Stanley Point is gone forever. In the 1950s, the Rockefeller built a hotel there, Estate Good Hope. And they put stone around the hotel for you to go in the ocean. When the refinery came in, the two industrial giants came in, it impacted the area so much that Rockefeller sold the hotel and become a school. We call it today Good Hope School. That entire area, the water is always murky. The beach house for Cotton Beach House going on in the ocean. So there's a lot of erosion taking place and it will never come back how it was. The fisherman now, major impact for the fisherman. Now being compensated. The Croix Lagoon was so great. George Seaman called it the Everglades. Millions and millions and millions of fish. So much fish to come into all it that the local folks throw the fish back in the water. In the lagoon, you can walk out and along the shore, you can just walk and catch fish, catch conch, and throw the conch back in the water. That's how productive it was before it was impacted by the refinery. So the history of the Croix Lagoon and the fishermen and the farmers, you cannot separate the farmers and the fishing industry. Around the Croix Lagoon was fertile land, which was gone to as well, what David spoke about. So the Croix Lagoon was a major wildlife refuge. Flamingos, and during the 1920s, 40s, and 50s, what we call game commission here. Folk come from all over the world, especially from the United States, come to shoot game here in the Croix Lagoon and throughout St. Croix and throughout the entire Virgin Islands.
So thank you for that. So basically we had the demise of our agricultural base as well as our fishing industry in one fell swoop. So let me go on to Olasi in terms of, you know, heavy industry. Can you go into a little bit more detail about the dredging that happened and how that initial and then the continuous dredging down there has impacted that whole South Shore?
Okay, first of all, the mangrove, the red, black, white, and butterwood, the mangrove protect the shoreline. Once you dredge the area, it changed the entire ecology of the site. And so as the dredge, the South Shore began to shift, the water began to shift, and also the coastal area, the land began to cave in and drop into the ocean. That impacting the seagrass bed, the coral reef. And when the dredge over 50 years ago, they created an island called, today we call it Wood Key, the small island out there, that was created from the dredge of the area. And because of that, a lot of our reef in that area was dead, totally dead. And they have a major impact on the fishing industry. What happened? Beaches began to disappear from the dredge over that period of time. Land began to disappear. And the water quality, you can't see your face. And that take over half a century. So a good example, if you go to Sandy Point, and you go on the southern part of Standing Point, and you go on the western part of Standing Point, you see a big difference in the water quality. And the western part, clear, and the southern part, not clear. When you're flying into the airport, you could see this white band, a strip on the south shore that go 50 years ago. Why interesting too as well, no hotel or any in a part of the island will never be built again, can't be built because the south shore is gone. So all this land are going from the lagoon heading to Sandy Point, the flat land where you can have other industry like hotel, for example, pretty beaches, that's gone. And the eastern part of the refinery, you have Estate King Garden Bay, which is close to Lemtree Bay. That area was impacted going on up to Manganido Bay, then you have Spring Bay, and then you have Haypenny. So if you go up to that area there, it impact that area there. So therefore, a lot of the sun in Spring Bay, Ripple, Lucas live in that area there. There's no more sun, and they're going further up to the Great Pond. So that's how far you go up over the period of time up to Robin Bay. All this area will be impacted over the years. But the more heavy impacted was on the southern part of the area. And so someone asked me if it will ever come back. It will never come back, not in our lifetime. Our 1,000 or 5,000 years now, it never came back because you changed the whole topography of the southern part of the island. Right now, Amana Bay, for example, near the racetrack, the sand is black. It used to be white. So all those areas just cave in and cave in. There's houses along this area now, like in Carlton, I was there the other day, along Enfield Green, the 2 houses now going into the ocean because it's constantly changing with the water going back and forth. So if you're building near this area, you have to build way further in. So there's 2 houses now about to go in the ocean.
Wow, thanks. David, oh, I didn't even pay attention to time. But we have a little bit more, about 5 minutes. David, and Olasi, I'll ask you both this question. You know, people mourn the destruction of the region as a result of the industrialization move. And you know, now people are learning how agriculture was destroyed, why just as St. Croix had, you know, for 30, 40 years been the, you know, the breadbasket basically of the Caribbean. David, maybe you could speak a little bit about, you know, that level of agricultural production beyond sugar. I mean, the sugar was profitable at that point. And we were an exporter of agricultural product.
The last 3 or 4 years that Vicor was operating, it was the sugar operation was profitable. It was generating profits. And I should say that Vicor, as a publicly organized corporation, by its mandate, had to channel all profits back into investments in education, healthcare, and infrastructure in the Virgin Islands. And the last 3 or 4 years, it was profitable in sugar. Beyond sugar, it also made huge investments to support local farmers. And in a few years, it was exporting 100, 300, 400, 500,000 pounds of vegetables to the mainland. The Vicor also ran a sort of farming lab for local farmers, and it provided over 1 million vegetable starts to local farmers at cost every year. It also, when there was some concern about prices of meat, it provided baby chicks, pigs, and other animals to those local farmers, again at cost, realizing that food was a public good, something we all need and something that supported the community. Vicor made investments in providing that basis for the community. All of that was lost when industry not only arrived at the island, but stomped out all public investments in agriculture at the same time.
Thanks.
I just
And
want
Lassie?
I just want to add that St. Croix were the fourth in the world in producing sugar. St. Croix was also a major exporter in animals. To go into explain to that is we don't have enough time, but St. Croix was a major producer, and that's why we got the Singapore Kaku today and the white-tailed sheep. But he also export animals. That was a major export. And what David mentioned is correct. Again, in my office, we had documentation and a history going back from the Danish about agriculture to the all American times. So what David's saying is exactly correct in terms of St. Croix and the fertile land that she should have. But definitely, she was a major, up to the 1940s, during the World War II, she would export certain crop to the United States. Again, we don't have the time to really go in and to share this document with you all. I read for the past years, over 30 years, I've been writing about the issue here, about the environment and agriculture, not only that, but the environment. So what David is talking about, a lot of those things I written over 30 years ago in the Daily News, especially about the South Shore area.
Well, I want to thank you both for this short conversation. You know, we want you to stay on because we're already getting questions for you that we're gonna bring to you after this. I'm going to now invite Summer Sibley Brown to take over and introduce the next panel.
David, hi, thank you so much, Frandel. David, I saw like your finger come towards the camera as if you just wrap something up quickly.
I was just gonna say one thing is that, you know, when Vicor was still operating, 1962, 1963, very little food imports to the Virgin Islands. 10 years after industry is here, I just looked up the numbers, it's like $60 million of food imports are required to support the Virgin Islands. Why? I mean, why does it go from 0 to 60 million? Because nothing is being grown locally in that moment after agriculture is crushed. So detail it jumped at me and I wanted to point it out.
Thank you so much. Thank you, David. Thank you, Olasti. Thank you for your commitment to this work. Thank you for the research that you both have done, and kind of like just keeping it in the forefront and elevating and being stewards of it for a time such as this, right? Where the information needs to be resurfaced and available to everyone. I am Summer Sibley Brown, the founder and executive director of Virgin Islands Good Food Coalition, member of the nonprofit consortium, and honored to be one of the hosts of this evening's second town hall in the series, Heavy Industry and the Food We Eat. And before we transition to speak to some of our honored guests, we have Luca Gasperi and Lindsay Simmons, two farmers who are going to join us. I just want to take a moment and go into the practice of acknowledging where we are, right? This is actually a strong, growing food system practice in terms of taking back and reclaiming sovereignty and acknowledging people. And so I want to acknowledge that where we are in the Virgin Islands is we are living, working, playing, learning, healing, right? And liberating ourselves in this moment on the land of the Taino, Carib Indian, Kalinago, and Arawakan speaking people, right? This is also the home of our enslaved ancestors, right? If secondary indigeneity is a thing, right? People who were taken from one part of the world and used as chattel and property came here and found a way and made a way, and we are the descendants of those people, right? And their legacy is here. So I invite us to respect them tonight. The last time I spoke about this being about fostering the relationship among Virgin Islanders necessary to continue the legacy of liberation. Virgin Islands Good Food is a small place-based nonprofit, and our mission actually, which was edited, revised by our board this year, seeks to advance the transformation, not the continuity, but the transformation of the Virgin Islands food system to a just and equitable food system, and to increase food and nutrition security, food sovereignty, and both sustainable and regenerative agriculture through education, public advocacy, and support services. So for anybody who might be confused, what a small grassroots nonprofit is doing in this conversation and why farmers are here is because my organization, and I think the people who I have the privilege of sharing this work with, right, which are farmers and consumers, there's a responsibility of stewardship. And so I'm happy to take us into a conversation with two phenomenal human beings who I get to laugh, eat, buy food from, and also rage silently against a lot of the injustice through their good works and care for the land. This is going to be very conversational. We have 20 minutes with you, and so I'm going to just jump right in. Luca, Lindsay, why don't we start by having you introduce yourselves, take a few minutes to tell us about who you are, your farm, where it's located, and anything you think is relevant. Thank you, Luca.
Hello, everybody. Lindsay, do you want to start?
It doesn't matter which one of us goes. Good night, everybody. My name is Lindsay Simmons. I thank everyone for being here this evening. Luca, thank you for letting me go first. Me and my husband, Randall Simmons, we own Mystical Farm. We're located up in the rainforest, so we're on the western side of the island. We're dead in the center of the rainforest. So we're in the heart of the rainforest. I would say we're west, but not really totally north. We have access to well water. We had lime tree rain oil on us. We have a video of this. We also have been farming for about, let's say, 2003. We have on and off farming. We have continued to do sustainable farming, organic farming, and working with our environment. And one of the most important things for us is being a steward of the land, so that not just our generation, our children's generation, but their children's and their children's and their children's can use these lands to farm. And like Summer said, these are the same lands our ancestors farmed on. We have actually found items on our farm that lead us to believe that these were agricultural grounds farmed back then. So that's my background. You're up, Luca.
Hello, everybody. My name is Luca Gasperi. So quickly, my parents moved here from Italy in the 60s to farm on the South Shore. The question is this, Summer, is this where you want us to say why we farm or just the introduction?
No, you could go speak from your heart, Luca. You could say why we farm, like you go for it.
All right, well, I took a little time and I wrote something today. So it really, for me, it comes down to clean, fresh food. I was born and raised on St. Croix. Grew up eating my father's home grown salad almost every day for lunch and for dinner, a side salad. So I grew up here, college years, went to New York City. And during that time, I'm an artist also, so I spent time doing art, but I was always interested in growing food and in farming. I interned on a farm in upstate, not so far upstate New York, called Keats Farm. We grew all kinds of stuff, not just one crop, but he grew so many different crops and multiple varieties of each crop, and he did it all organically. There was 6 of us. We would go to New York City and we would sell our food. The comments that the customers would say to us, the difference it made in the taste, the difference that it made in how they felt, kind of got me excited. Before that, I was a graphic designer, and you never had a client say, this is so important to me. They would just say, okay, good, on to the next thing. But with food is very different. Food is so important to everyone. So when I did this, I realized this is what I want to do when I move back to St. Croix. I knew I wanted to move back to St. Croix. I didn't know what I was going to do, but this was kind of like, okay, I think I can do this. So I moved back to St. Croix, and I knew a little bit about farming in upstate New York. I knew a little bit about farming on St. Croix, but I wanted to learn more. So I spent time with an older farmer named Henry Carter. I helped him a little bit. Kyla Wetz was still alive. I spent time with Kyla Wetz. There was other people, Errol Chichester, Abera, other people that were active at that time. I mean, they are still active now, but they were more active then, and I learned a lot from them. And then basically I just started farming, and that was 22 years ago. So why I farm is for the clean, fresh food. And that's my intro.
Luca and Lindsay, thank you so, so much. My next question is, you both mentioned a little bit about your farm practices, right? Lindsay, you mentioned organic. Luca, you mentioned organic. You mentioned finding things that let you know that there was farming on your land before, and Luca, your dad farmed theirs. How important, one, is practices to you? The practices, like the practices of stewardship, like as farmers, to the way in which you take care of your land. And this question leads into the question I'm going to ask after, but why did you choose those practices?
Mystical Farm chose organic farming because, like Luca said, fresh, good food. It raises the nutrition, it raises the sustainability, it raises seed production. Your ability to continue farming in a natural way is always better organic. When you go to the store and you buy a GMO vegetable, it actually has less nutrition in it than an organic, homegrown, local, fully ripe picked fruit or vegetable. So there needs to be a balance with your community that's immediate. We have the island and the size of the island that we are, and then we have the Caribbean, what we can export to and still keep our freshness. And we wanted to maintain these lands to be able to be used for that. We have a lot of other things going on these lands, other ways of making money or whatever, and we wanted it to be a foundational balance. This pays into the economy, but it's also a need. Your people need to eat. So this became very obvious to the entire island after the storms that we ship in a lot of food, and our ability to immediately get back up and produce food again, it was haphazard. I don't know how many farmers store seeds in long term or save that last row of cucumbers to let them overgrow to collect the seeds. So these practices need to be held so we can keep maintaining these properties to be used for these purposes.
Luca?
Yeah. Yes, it's like we're so as people now, everything's getting so much faster, and we want everything so quickly. But if we don't slow down when it comes to growing food and grow it in a better way, there's repercussions to that. So as far as the way we like to grow here on the farm, and by the way, it's the art farm, my wife Christina, our daughter Marina, and my parents. It's on the south shore of St. Croix, east of the refinery. But Olasi was mentioning a lot of the beaches that I know, and he's not kidding when he talks about the sand falling into the water. It's incredible. So first and foremost, we keep experimenting, because the only constant I've noticed in farming for these 20 plus years is change. I mean, it's every season is so different. But I'm just gonna say a few different things that we have tried and that we do. French intensive, intercropping, low till, permaculture, deep mulching, local seafood composting, hugelculture. We are a not certified farm, meaning that we use organic methods to the best of our ability, but we're not certified. There's a cost, and there's a lot more work to do that. We're not so interested in doing that. And low spray, like even if you're organic, you can spray stuff that will kill just about every insect, but it won't last long in the environment. So it's better than the conventional method. I don't want to spray things that'll kill everything. So even though it's allowed in organic production, I really try not to do that unless it's, anyway, I really don't, because spiders, jacks, centipedes, all these things that a lot of people, think are pests are actually so important. If you spray a broad spectrum organic pesticide, you will kill those things, even though it's organic. So organic is important, but it's important to know exactly what you're doing. So our focus is on soil health, feeding the soil with as much locally sourced inputs as possible, meaning, why am I gonna bring stuff in if we have it here? Why am I gonna pollute the air to bring stuff in if we can source it here? So we do what we can with local inputs. We have livestock on the farm, and we do intensive rotational grazing, which is a form of regenerative agriculture. It basically, you're adding more to the soil than you're taking out. The way we graze, the grass has way more time to regenerate, to grow, than not. And if you overgraze, it's obvious what happens. So that's how we farm.
So thank you for both. And I want, for our listening audience to highlight, I wanted to highlight the level of care and concern these farmers, right? These business people, because that's what they are. They're also business people, right? So they're land stewards, but this is the business that puts money in their pockets. It feeds their family, and they're taking these extra precautions also to be in good relationship with the land, right? So this leads into my question. The title of this panel is There Oil in Our Soil, right? Because they're caring for the soil. They're being conscious of the efforts of what is happening to our water. And then we have heavy industry. So Luca and Lindsay, are there any priorities or major concerns when you consider the heavy industry on St. Croix that you think about, that keep you up or are on your radar, right? That you think is impacting the land where you may grow food?
Well, the obvious that everybody knows about is the refinery. Where I am is me and Luca are in two different worlds. We're in completely two different ecosystems. I worry about maintaining the health of my soil. I don't have to build the health of my soil. But my soil would absorb that oil that fell from the sky like nothing. And we have wells all over the rainforest, so we have to protect that water. It's going to go right down to it. We also have to watch how many people are using these waters. There's, beyond farming, there's a ton of people that live out here in the last 20 years also, and they've got fruit trees. This is a normal activity for any island person, that you have a couple fruit trees in your yard. You have, and if you own 4 or 5 acres, you're going to have fruit trees. So yeah, we do watch our water usage. We're not concerned with the health of our water because we test it. Lime tree hasn't affected it yet. I'm going to say yet, but something like oil can change the pH levels in your soil, which can wreak havoc on everything you just planted. We crop rotate. Crop rotations help maintain the health of the soil. They put things back after being used. We let fields sit, and rotating crops also helps with the bug content and helping reduce that spraying that Luca's talking about. He's absolutely right. We can over spray organic stuff, and it can wreak havoc on your environment as well. I live close to Honeyman. We see his bees lift from tree to tree and pollinate throughout our entire valley. So we have to watch what we're doing. We live in an ecosystem where we all live so close to each other that we impact each other majorly. Our soil health has not depleted. We did not see anything hurtful on our trees or plants, thank God, but we actually are landscape. we actually own a landscaping company called Mystical Lawn Care. And I can say that we did see some damages on certain trees around the island and sit there and go, huh, well, I guess they were close enough that that one side took that blow and all the leaves fell off, or the grass was really brittle and dry and wasn't growing right. So we did definitely see around the island where it was impacted and how bad it was impacted. So this is a serious concern. I don't just sell my stuff. I find it very important to help everybody with their trees collect their goods and sell things also. Summer ran a grant program when we have a farm tienda, and we open that to the community. Like, we want everybody out there selling their fruits, their vegetables, so that we all can be partaking in this, number one, healthy food, local, number two, economic benefit. You know, so we're all participating in that. The west side of the island is literally built like you should have little farms in your houses, in your lots in town. You know, the streets are so wide, like farm vendors along the roadside. We really are made and designed to support agriculture. And then we threw it in the garbage a couple of decades ago. But our sustainability as people on these islands requires that we feed ourselves. Okay, so I will say that I have seen in Frederickstead, months, possibly even years ago, Clean Sweep had up a picture where there was raw sewage running from the post office all the way down to the fish market and going into the ocean right there, where the children play, the men fish, they clean the fish, right? The boats go in right there. So beyond my farm, I'm concerned, because farms work as partners. We're rotating crops based off of what other people are planting too. When my cucumbers are done, I send people to another farmer to get their cucumbers. We want smaller farms so that we don't have a big commercialized industry, and so we don't harm the land, we don't harm the water usage in the areas, and we can keep that crop rotation happening. So healthy soil, healthy bugs, healthy molds and mildews, right? So all of that stuff goes into it, and all of our farms depend on each other. Any of those farms are going to hurt the industry and our ability to supply food for our people.
Thank you, Lindsay. Luca, your concerns or priorities as it relates to soil, water, heavy industry?
Yes, and I just want to say that what I second what Lindsay was just saying as far as the scale of farms on St. Croix. You know, the idea of the commons, the idea of resources that we're all gonna use. If you have a really big player, that big player is possibly gonna take too much and make all the smaller farms suffer. So I've always kind of advocated for many small farms, self-owned little businesses. It's, to me, that just makes a lot more sense. It has a lot of benefits. So as far as the we're at the concerns part, right? Okay, so my concerns. Okay, so climate change. Sorry, I wrote notes and it's just easier for me. So climate change has been my concern for a while. You know, when farming it's getting harder as climate gets more kind of off balance, right? I mean, we're all kind of noticing like drier spells, and then when it rains, a lot of times it's not enough or it's way too much, which, you know, farming has always been difficult in that sense, but it's getting, to me personally, I can only speak for myself, but it's getting hard. So, you know, there isn't much we can do about the big picture for the whole world, but, you know, locally, if we focus locally, I'm concerned that we are basically poisoning our own small island, our own little place where we can possibly grow food and live sustainably and keep on living, and my daughter can keep on living, and her kids can keep on living. So fresh water, seawater, air, and soil are not, you know, a limitless resource. So I'm just concerned that the level of toxins in the world, and definitely locally we're seeing it, could possibly reach a point where the soil is so poisoned that we can't grow in it. And, that means that we're not going to be healthy anymore. We're going to start getting sick. And one could argue, and if one did more studies, maybe that's happening already. There's cancer and different illnesses are moving up. Could it be tied to all this industry? I'm concerned. And farming where I'm farming, the wind has to switch drastically for something from Havenza to hit us. But it has hit me before. Luckily it wasn't like a emission, but we could smell. There's times where we can't smell Havenza and we can hear it super loud when the wind switches. So even though I'm east of Havenza, Lime Tree, it doesn't mean I'm out of the picture. And as far as what happens in the sea, definitely not out of the picture. If the currents switch, which they do, pollution can definitely come east. The other thing is, there's air, but then there's the water table. Like, we are closer to Havenza. Water usage to me is like, that's my biggest issue from a farming standpoint, because without water, water is life. You can't grow food. You can't survive without water. Food, you can go a little bit longer, but without water, you will die, and plants will die without water. We are not respecting our water resources on the island. And I'm talking mainly of wells. People are overusing wells like it's some kind of limitless pit. How is that water under the soil regenerated? Does it just appear from nowhere? It comes from soil percolating. Water percolates through the soil and ends up back down there. It doesn't come from the ocean magically. It comes from rain. So if our soils are poisoned, in time, our well water will be poisoned. And as most people know, under Lime Tree, and that this is pre-Lime Tree, but they had oil leaking a long time ago. And there's many wells where they are, cleaning up that water. So it's something that they know about, they're cleaning up. But anyway, to me, wells and taking care of our well water, taking care of our soil, our resources, that's basic. And we have to make it step one, because without that, we have nothing. What are we just going to keep bringing in food and keep relying on America for everything? So sorry, it's no joke.
No, sorry. We have to, this is the time to state facts, different perspectives, to hopefully engender our community to begin examining the interconnectivity to all of this, right? These aren't accidents. David spoke to the deliberate efforts historically of our leaders to dismantle, disfranchise, and kill an industry that was feeding people, which changed the trajectory of our food path that you are living and working in currently, struggling as independent farmers. Olassi talked about the inability to regenerate or repair what was lost at Croix Lagoon and in our South Shore beaches, that nobody any longer has access to those resources. And I am sure Luca and Lindsay and we had a call yesterday, and we were on the phone for probably 30, 40 minutes more than we should be, right? So what we decided is there's space for conversation like this, and this 20 minutes was just a teaser. And I feel like it went by so quickly, and we want to make space for the audience. So my last, and if in one word to close out this section, Lindsay and Luca, can I ask, what is your response, one word, to what you heard David and Olassi say tonight?
One word you gave me, huh?
Mhm.
Honoring. I thought what they were doing by bringing back those memories and those stories was honoring us. And
Thank you.
I grew up here. I've gone to school here. I grew up here. I've never heard any of that ever taught to me. So I know I'm supposed to be shocked and this and that. I'm really not anymore. I'm in honor. that they shared it, and then this is public, and that now this is a resource where people can access it.
Thank you. Honoring Luca.
Well, when I read it, I was just like, it was anger and disbelief, like unreal. I couldn't, it was really disbelief. But now I'm like Lindsay, I'm very grateful that David has written these. And I mean, Olassi's been speaking to all of this for so long, but we just have to wake up, because yeah. So thank you for bringing us up to speed on important issues.
And with that, I'm going to transition, and we want to open the floor for comments, questions, concerns that can go into the Q&A. Or nope, I'm going to pass it back to Frandel. I think I just did the wrong thing.
No, you did. That's good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lindsay and Luca and Summer and you know, Lindsay almost brought me to tears here. But it is truly an honor to be sitting here with all of you and all of the people that are, you know, on this Zoom, and the folks that are on Facebook Live, as not only we learn about our history, but you know, about the day-to-day of the value of the work of our farmers and our fishermen, even though we don't have a fisherman here. But I just wanted to let everybody know that we have a number of people that we invited. Some we actually sent questions out to. And a quick run through, we have with us representative from the EPA, Dave Klusner. We have with us Elizabeth Neville, who's legal counsel to the St. Croix Environmental Association. We also have Makeda Okolo, who is with NOAA. I don't know that she's going to want to say anything, but she's on in that event. And we sent out invitations to a number of our legislators, specifically to Senator Gittens in his position as chairperson of the Committee on Economic Development and Agriculture. We sent out invitations to the Department of Planning and Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife Division, and also to Commissioner Nelson of the Department of Agriculture. And I believe, and we also have Senator Genevieve Whitaker, who is with us. I wanted to just frame this very quickly by letting everybody know that Senator Gittens did respond in writing. We will post his entire response, but I'd like to excerpt a little. One, thank him for acknowledging the invitation, but he indicated he had scheduling conflicts. And one of the things that he did indicate is that prior to the recent emissions at Lime Tree, I'm quoting him now, we had an economic development and agriculture hearing planned to address the general concerns of local farmers and fishers. In light of what has transpired in recent weeks, I made the decision to also request specific information as to the potential short and long-term impacts of airborne pollutants on these industries, and welcome those with concerns or information in this regard to contact my office prior to the hearing to be held later this summer on St. Croix. I do believe there are specific local laws regarding the impact of pollution on farmers and home gardeners. However, it is something to I do not believe there are specific local laws regarding the impact of pollution on farmers and home gardeners. However, it is something to consider given ongoing concerns with air and groundwater contaminants. I do agree that more information is needed as to the potential impact of recent emissions on public health and our environment, to include our farms and fisheries. That's just an excerpt from his letter, but the St. Croix Foundation will post his response on Engage VI. We also received responses. So what we do is we send out specific questions, folks. We received responses from the Department of Agriculture Assistant Commissioner Diana Collingwood, who indicated that they had a conflict and could not be on the Zoom. But we asked if the Department of Agriculture was responsible for monitoring the soil and water conditions on farms. And she indicated that currently the VIDA does not have budgeted positions to include a soil scientist and related staff, nor do they have the equipment and related resources required to conduct the monitoring of soil and water conditions on farms. And she went on to explain the various partners at UVI and the USDA National Resources Conservation District that they work with to promote responsible management and conservation of natural resources. And another question that was asked was, in the event that farms have suffered contamination from the oil spray and other releases from industry, what remediation resources are available through the department? And her answer is, if the source of the contamination is documented, once quantified, it will be important to work through the entity responsible to identify solutions and to conduct the mitigation efforts to address them. Another question was, what protocols, if any, were dispatched to assist farmers and to protect produce directly west of Lime Tree Bay Refinery after the incidences? She indicated that when contacted by farmers with related concerns, we visit their farms, document the impact, and share the hotline number provided to us by the Lime Tree Bay Refinery staff for their follow-up. Protocols have yet to be established for overall dispatch to assist farmers and to protect produce. We have reached out to the NRCS Caribbean Area Office for input and federal support to mitigate damages to farmers once Lime Tree Bay has completed its mitigation plans in addressing the issue with local farmers and homeowners. The last response is from Director Nicole Angeli of the Division of Fish and Wildlife of the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. We asked her if she could provide an explainer regarding the ambient monitoring program and the point source monitoring program and groundwater monitoring program. And her response, oh, goodness gracious. I thought it was on this piece of paper I was looking at, but she did respond in detail, and I'm going to get back to those responses as soon as I find them. So with that, I'd like to invite Genevieve Whitaker, Senator. Genevieve Whitaker, she has a short statement that she'd like to share. Senator.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good evening. Good evening to all. I want to first just continue to express my gratitude to our community, to begin to applaud the efforts of the St. Croix Foundation. And as I've shared in my statement, the community has become, and for me to participate in this town hall, the community has become a place of chaos and discontent. And so I applaud the St. Croix Foundation for community development in partnership with the members of the nonprofit consortium, Christian Heritage and Nature Tourism, Inc., CHANT, the St. Croix Environmental Association, the Good Virgin's Good Food Coalition for coordinating this event. In our community, we are faced with environmental hazards that hamper the growth and development of future generations. As presenters, we bring forward issues and concerns, which was really laid out tonight. And I'm really receptive to the comprehensive needs of the territory. As a citizen, it's my duty to protect my home, and as a senator that has been appointed by the people, I shall provide oversight and help to craft legislation for a safer environment, which I'm doing. Town halls like these are what help strengthen the foundations the grassroots people have laid for us. The villages are what we make up the community. We cannot continue to ignore the destruction that past decisions have made. As a senator, I've taken part in several meetings with local farmers. I have a whole ecosystem and farmers. I'm working, visiting their farms. I'm not on the Economic Agriculture Committee, but I've gone out to them. One such meeting a few months back, and most recently, not just last week, meeting additional farmers as well as fishermen to hear their concern. And we continue to encourage all to reach out to our office and become stakeholders to bring new ideas to the table. We're in the process of repairing our broken education system, my office, and which lacks the teaching of our own environment within the curriculum. As we move forward and progress for a better future, we urge the citizens to keep hope alive. We will form a stronger bond and foundation as one territory, because to live in peace and good health is the reality we need, not just a dream. We will prosper and prevail and sow the seeds for a better future for generations to come, since yours truly. And for me, this is a lifelong, for those who don't know my background, I've been involved in environmental justice advocacy from high school into my college years, into my whole background, the United Nations work, advocacy at international level, and my push, because even on this call this evening, I'm really happy to say that I have offered legislation as it pertains to environmental education. As our goal would be to, as we reform the education system, to ensure that we have our next set of environmental justice advocates and persons who will be on the front line, who will be the individuals who will help reshape our community. And I want to thank persons even like Miss Jennifer Bayless, who has reached out to my office, and we've had meetings. Summer, with Full Coalition, Brandel, of course, Ms. James, everyone who I've engaged with over the years, and that's what I have to say. So thank you very much. I will continue to do my best to champion the rights of our environment. In terms of my specific efforts regarding what went on with Lime Tree and the environment impact, I actually, of course, as many know, we participated in a Lime Tree meeting, but also too, I held a meeting with waste management as well. And I had also consistently reached out to the DPNR, continuing efforts. And when it comes to agriculture, I have since January made tireless efforts to reach out to Commissioner Nelson over farmer concerns, and those concerns have been unanswered, just to put out there openly. So I want to thank the grassroots for their support, and I continue to be here to support and to look forward to your support as we together work on reform measures. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your support. I found the responses from Director Anjali, and her responses are that I'd like to read into the record what her response to our request to attend, and also the list of questions we gave her. She indicated, good day, we host and facilitate a St. Thomas Fishers Advisories Committee meeting the second Thursday of each month from 6:30 to 8:30. So our participation in surveillance of monitoring and mitigation of environmental contaminants is only related to wildlife incidences. Wildlife reported injured or contaminated are collected and reported to the Department of Health and the Department of Agriculture. Depending on the nature of the incident, local or stateside laboratory analysis occurs. Thus, it is important for the public to report incidences to DPNR, and can occur all hours on chip at 411. The second question we asked, I'm scrolling y'all, is how does DPNR's groundwater program inform farmers on the quality of their water? And she indicates that DPNR DFW participants in oiled wildlife response and training with, oh no, she didn't answer that question. But she also indicated that DPNR participates in wildlife response training with Tri-State, and they are there to assist in the first hours of any oil incident on the territory, and they're trained to triage oiled wildlife for the first 72 hours of any oil incident. And she also indicated we do not encourage the consumption of wildlife or wild forage plants, as good knowledge of soil content where plants are grown and the diet of animals is necessary for safe consumption of wildlife. Apologies that we will not be able to attend, and best of luck in the town hall. And we thank her for her response. We had asked some questions of DPNR about their well monitoring and water testing, but we did not receive any responses to that. So with that, and we're running on time, I'm going to invite Dave Klusner of the EPA to say a few words. And Dave, I think we shared with you a few questions. And I think fundamentally, maybe we can start off with a brief update from the EPA on the ongoing investigation at Lime Tree on the multiple releases. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Frandel. Very much appreciated. Yes, my name is David Klusner. I'm Director of Strategic Programs in the Office of the Regional Administrator in EPA Region 2. Region 2 covers New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. I just wanted to say that it has been a pleasure under these terrible circumstances, but it has been a pleasure to get to know Frandel a little better, Jennifer Vialulis, Elizabeth Neville. Again, you know, this is there are so many things that I can say, so I don't want to take too much time. I do want to hear some questions, but the lived experiences that have been shared with us in the previous town hall, in the updates that EPA has provided to St. Croix Environmental Association and allied organizations, those have been so powerful and compelling and real and genuine, heartbreaking. Our office is located in Manhattan. I live in Manhattan, resident of Manhattan, but we have a huge team of folks devoted and dedicated to addressing the tremendous environmental concerns, problems, and issues along the South Shore Industrial Corridor. It is our goal to provide access to information for residents, for community organizations, nonprofit organizations, to provide access to information, provide access to decision makers, to identify, to make sure that all the environmental issues, problems, and concerns are identified and addressed, and that we have a comprehensive community engagement plan for moving forward on a variety of issues. There's Lime Tree Bay Refinery. There's a number of other environmental issues and sources of contamination and concern in St. Croix. So we have the Lime Tree Bay Refinery matter has definitely served as a catalyst to direct our attention in a very concentrated way. The circumstances, the issues, the reports and complaints on the hotline that we have established have really crystallized a lot of very compelling matters. And it's been, you know, the staff that have staffed the hotline, the stories that we are hearing, they matter. They have made a difference. There are issues that are reported that I can tell you, have gone directly to the administrator of EPA. So there are days when we receive a lot of calls on the hotline. Earlier in May, the hotline was very active, and we received over 200 plus calls during the first week, and that has dropped down since the refinery has shut down completely. There was a period from May 14th to approximately May 26th where the refinery was still in the process of shutting down, right? It could not be done overnight, but there was a period of cleaning and evacuating the various units and the infrastructure at the refinery where they were still off-gassing and flaring. So the call volume has dropped off, but we still maintain staff to receive those calls, everybody that calls in, and I'll just give you the number right now in case anybody needs it. It is 866-462-4789. And we can certainly put that in the chat as well. I have a couple of my colleagues here on this call with me, so perhaps one of them can put that in the chat, or I'll do that later. So I can tell you that there is a very large team of very dedicated and committed folks at EPA that are working night and day to address a myriad of issues and concerns. But what we want to provide is a long-term, comprehensive community engagement plan, right? So that is under development. We have collected the information from the hotline and are developing GIS, the GIS mapping tools to then share with our partners in this process to work on community monitoring, right? We want to, our goal is to empower the community, whether it be through a citizen science equipment loan program to monitor air quality. We're working on that. We would like to identify partnerships with perhaps the University of the Virgin Islands. What kind of equipment can we provide them? What we need to really focus and some serious attention on developing capacity at the Virgin Islands DPNR. I hear the concerns and levels of distrust among a number of people of the VI government, but I think we have to really try to develop capacity to strengthen their capabilities, and to the extent that we can reset certain relationships if that's possible. But we are one agency, and we cannot do it alone. And it truly is about leveraging resources, collaborating with partner agencies, whether it's a federal agency, a territorial agency, nonprofits, community organizations. We have a variety of tools, and we're going to pull from this toolbox. We're going to pull from grants, our technical assistance resources, community monitoring. I just wanted to point out that there was, I believe, a question or a comment in the chat box about federal protections to safeguard the ag industry from the oil contamination. I just wanted to point out that the EPA does have a formal federal advisory committee, FACA. It's called the Federal Farm, Ranch, and Rural Committee. And I can put that information in the chat box as well. It was formed in 2020, reformed, I should say, in 2020. While there are no members from the Virgin Islands, Graciela Ramirez Toro is with the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico. And so we can certainly work with that Federal Farm, Ranch, and Rural Committee on agriculture issues. We can work with the USDA on the various programs that we have. And then the Regional Agriculture Advisor for EPA Region 2 is Bob Nyman, and he reports directly to me. So that is an avenue. I mentioned a few other. So I think I view this as a toolbox, right? There's so many issues. There's a lot of resources that we can sort of connect the dots, develop a community engagement plan with input and involvement from residents, community, environmental organizations, and develop a comprehensive plan for addressing those tremendous environmental problems that are faced by the residents. So I just want to say thank you. I'll pause right there because I have a tendency to talk too long. My staff have reported that, and I'm probably getting texted right now by one of them to just pause.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that information and the potential for future resources. We've got a lot of questions coming in, but we don't want to be rude. Elizabeth, if you could take 2 minutes to just sort of let folks know maybe what you're doing and what the push is now for water quality testing and perhaps even, issues beyond the air emissions, which have receded since the shutdown of the refinery.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and good night, everyone. I've just been really humbled and honored to be here this evening. First and foremost, thank you so much to everyone who has spoken. David, Alassi, Luca, and Lindsay, you have shared just really valuable, essential history and information. And I just, and Summer and everyone, just thank you so much. So INC have been working hard to liaise with EPA, and we're really grateful for the attention and focus that has been given to this issue. Something that has been very prominent in our focus lately is working on getting community monitoring equipment for air pollution in the hands of Virgin Islanders. That is a federal reference method that will put the power to essentially respond to quickly and prevent incidences like the traumatic incidences of May in the hands of the community. So that is a big priority for us. And we're really grateful for the collaborative opportunities, and we've been working very hard on that. In terms of water quality, we have been raising those concerns to EPA as well. EPA has a resource called ECHO, where you can look at pollution levels online, and we had noticed that there were exceedances for water pollution, so we have raised that to EPA as well, and that's been a primary source of advocacy. Right now, we're really just, so the way I see my role, working with C, is that we're trying to bring the lived experiences, the community and community experiences to the forefront, to the federal government, and to make sure that we're heard. Because I think if you read Professor Bond's writings especially, it's very clear that a lot has been not responded to appropriately for decades. And we're at a breaking point. And I think there has been some times, just speaking from my experience, speaking to folks back home, there's sometimes been a tendency to romanticize the Hovenza days, particularly in the 90s. And I think that we're beginning to see what things really were like, who was burdened, who was benefiting. And I think that we're at a really critical point to re-examine how we move forward. So we are and we will continue to advocate for accountability of this facility of industrial pollution to the Virgin Islands, raising issues like the dumping of sewage was raised by Lindsay. I believe I have been sent pictures of that happening in Christiansted. It's happening all over the island, your sewage just running into the sea. It's not healthy for anyone. So we will continue to raise these issues, to advocate, and to be a voice as best as we're able. And I am just so humbled and so grateful to get to serve this community that gave me so much in this way. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So we've had a lot of people asking questions, and I'm going to start with a question in our Q&A. And the question is why, and this is David, you probably are going to be the one who's going to get the most questions. Why was the island of St. Croix as an agricultural land chosen to be the place to create such heavy environmentally polluted and destructive industries?
It's a great question, and it's a question that was asked at the time, and it was asked across the Caribbean. And there were different debates about where the best future of an independent Caribbean lie, whether in cultivating agriculture adequate to meet the needs of new nations, or whether industry was necessary to advance into modernity with some stature. So this was a debate that was not unique to St. Croix, but it happened across the Caribbean at this time. St. Croix has the debate. Governor Pewanski, Ralph Pewanski, decides that the future is heavy industry, but doesn't put heavy industry on St. Thomas or St. John. Looks around and identifies the South Shore of St. Croix as the place for heavy industry, and where a lot of local folks saw the bounty of the mangroves. Governor Pewanski saw it as a trash dump, described it as a useless piece of land that could only be improved by the introduction of heavy industry.
I just want to add before Governor Pewanski, it go back to the 1940s before he came on the scene. Our first appointed Black governor, William Hasip, that came up in the 1940s to diversify the industry in the Virgin Islands more into heavy industry. But it just happened that Pewanski came along and he made it happen. But that question go way back. Once upon a time, they want to put the industry in St. Thomas, but then because of sort of small area, a habitat, for example, in the Havenside area, they decided not in St. Thomas. So he came out to St. Croix. So the history is very long before we was born, in terms of the history of how it get here in the first place. And when Hess came here, he has to contact St. Lucia. They didn't want it, so they take the storage facilities. And we here in St. Croix, we take everything. Again, we don't have time to go and explain in detail, but I just want to say one thing about the farmers. St. Croix aqueduct is 25% bigger than St. Thomas. Kingtail Aqueduct and the refinery, along with gas station and sewage, already impact. I have information where a lot of aqueduct closed down. For example, the one in Barron Spot where the craft and the refinery, we find oil there. So again, before even LM3 putting out this pollution, the aqueduct is already impacted. There's many places have closed down. And I've written articles about that, explain what the aqueduct is. One of the biggest ones, the Craft and Agriculture Estate Adventure, have close to about 20-something wells that closed down, for example. So agriculture already been impacted by the underground water resources.
So you're saying like the one at Adventure is closed because of
the one at Adventure is closed. If what happened with WAPA, they will mix the potable water with well water. So you notice along the highway, like in Memphis Highway, there's a big green tank. So they got well there. So when WAPA pump their water, so it's mixed and add chlorine, and the one there by a Craftsman Agriculture Estate Adventure, it have a big green storage tank. So you have the potable water and plus well water mixing together. And again, I got a lot of research information on the gas station. So that was say it take time. So the aqueduct is already being impacted. The other thing about the aqueduct, only 3 to 5% population. That's the other history in itself alone. So although the rain that we're getting is not so much going down, it's running off into the ocean. Okay. So that's the other topic by itself in terms for agriculture. So don't really let the rain fool you while it's rain falling on the ground, it's running up. But during the sugarcane era, it percolates and go down. And that's why our streams and small rivers was running, for example. That's the other topic by itself.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do that one separate. So we have another question. How can the value of the agricultural industry be formalized with the territorial and federal government? What federal protections are in place to safeguard our agricultural industry from pollution from the oil refinery? I'm not sure who could answer that question. David, you want to take a shot? And perhaps Uh,
I can
I
very,
can answer it. Go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say very briefly, historically, when industry first arrived, there was a lot of concern and a few reports were made about the impact that industry was having on land usage on island. And there was a strong recommendation from the island to set aside the prime agricultural land and prevent its development, and some concern about pollution impacting it. And all of those were sort of written and submitted up the ladder and didn't seem to have any impact.
I was involved in protecting prime agricultural land with Farmer Senator Tolan. Now I have documentation from 1965 with the late Pyransky. A study was done before Bethlehem was closed, and it gave recommendation, and it was not carried out by the government. And so with Tolan and some other senators, we protect prime agricultural land, should not be built on. And we have 12,000 acres of prime agricultural land. This is what we call prime agricultural land, and agricultural land is two different things. And that require in terms of the water resources, the type of soil that you have in a particular area. So there is a law protecting government prime agricultural land, but it's still in jeopardy because of politics. That's the reason I wrote 2 articles about a tech park, because I want to use prime agricultural land to build. And so I wrote those 2 articles, but I was involved in helping with that bill a couple years ago, and it was passed. It's right there to protect the prime agricultural land, government agricultural land, I should say. A good example, half the land already gone with the estate slab, with the debris from the hurricane. And also during, and I talk straight for, also during the Governor DeYoung, he sold some prime agricultural land to, I won't call it business, for example, which is against the law. So we do have a law to protect prime agricultural land. And secondly, the land should be under the Department of Agriculture, not under the Department of Procurement that they should manage. So we do have government agriculture be protected.
Thank you for that. We have a number of questions. Question for David Bond. Doing your research, did you come across any information as to why Governor Pyransky thought homestead commercial agriculture could not coexist and thrive with the new manufacturing industry?
It's a great question. It's a question I've asked myself because it seems like his response is irrational and over the top. The little I've come across is 2 things. One, he has long-standing discontent, dislike of Vicor and the New Deal sort of projects on island. He takes himself as a businessman primarily and a politician second. And he thinks that free market business is the only way, and early on is promising to take the first opportunity he has to do away with Vicor. So there is a kind of ideological element to it. The second is that when he invites industry Harvey, there's a real healthy debate on St. Croix in the papers about Harvey coming. Some people are for it, some people are against it. The wages are much better than anything offered. And so there is some folks that really get behind it. But the opposition that voices the most prevalent opposition to it is from farmers. And I think that something about the opposition that farmers, basically the farmers are saying, this is happening too fast, there's too much at stake, let's slow down and really think this out before we decide. And I think that that critique that's being voiced by farmers upset Pyransky, and there might be something there that he decides to then push back even harder against them to silence that voice of critique. But it's a question that I've never adequately answered for what happens. because it happens way above and beyond what's necessary, and what most people on island are actually okay with and want to think with.
Okay.
I would
Thank
say it got deeper than that before Pywanski. This going back to 1878, which I can't explain. I read an article and I kind of touch on that in time of the homestead and before the homestead, a land reform when it comes to farmers. So hopefully the people will print the article and I give a little detail about agricultural land, for example. But in time of Pywanski, he was a businessman. And basically, they want to get out of agriculture. In fact, he the one that passed the 2 laws, which was an article, and basically it was a giveaway for Harvey and for the oil refinery, for example. That's in the article too, and giving out the figures. So he dealing with this. So it's really, Hess was really glad when a bill was passed, and Harvey was very glad when the bill was passed. And look, David mentioned the center of the islands, when a bill was passed, that means it industrialized. And right or wrong, the refinery was the same thing too as well. So the government talk about one thing, I got a report. They call St. Croix economical, I call it development. In 1965, I have that report. He's saying one thing and he do something that's different from that. But the main thing was in being a businessman in business, and you want to get out of that. But before that, it going back to 1878 with land reform. You have to really understand before Pywanski exists.
Thank you for that. I have a question for Dave to the EPA. How can we qualify for super funds to achieve levels of remediation?
Thank you, Frandel. Yeah, thanks for saying Dave from the EPA, because when I hear Dave Bond, Dave EPA, so, I'm like, I'm not sure if I can answer that question. That Dave Bond jumps in, which is great. So all right, so Superfund and remediation. So for the folks on it, Superfund is there's a statute, the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. It's a mouthful, so they refer to it as Superfund. So it is a trust fund for remediation of uncontrolled and abandoned hazardous waste sites, right? There's various arms to the Superfund program. Superfund. So with respect to Lime Tree Bay Refinery, there is an aspect to the Superfund law that pertains to the spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plan. Okay, so this is basically this is the emergency management and preparedness arm of the Superfund law. So that gets to the containment plans there at the refinery. So they have to meet certain requirements to ensure that if there is a spill that is adequately contained, that there's plans in place. Okay, I think that's probably not what you're getting at. You're getting more at the remediation side of presumably the Lime Tree Bay facility, right? The refinery and terminals operation. So that is a longer term process. The remediation process starts off with what we call a pre-remedial assessment of people that are potentially exposed, wildlife and humans that are exposed. What are the contaminants? What is the nature and extent of contamination? Are there what we call receptors? Those are bugs, bunnies, and sea critters and people. And then we go through a ranking process. Does it rank high enough on the a national priorities list, which is a list of Superfund sites, and is there territorial support for inclusion of such a site for getting it on the Superfund list? Okay, so that is the remedial program is a long-term process with multiple steps in that process. Superfund also has an emergency management component. The federal on-scene coordinators that are on island now operating the monitoring stations for SO2 and H2S at the 5 fixed monitoring stations, those are Superfund employees, EPA Superfund funded employees with their environmental response team. So there's the monitoring side of it, there's the emergency side of it. There is a facility in upstate New York, the Tonawanda Coke facility, in Tonawanda, New York, where EPA did an assessment, did air monitoring, and assisted in the very controlled shutdown of that coke facility. And then ultimately New York State, which has a lot deeper capacity, and David is just like flying around on my screen. So we were heavily involved in that facility as well. So long story short, there's the emergency response, there's the long-term assessment, and then there's the spill prevention and containment component to that question. So I just wanted to sort of like those three major components. So I don't think that probably answered the question fully, but that's probably about the furthest I can go right now in terms of that answer.
Okay. And another quick question for you. A viewer on Facebook says, who is testing the soil for hydrocarbon poisoning? The Daily News reported months ago that hydrocarbons were released during a routine maintenance event at the refinery. Is the EPA testing for hydrocarbons in particular? And who receives the testing results? And is it being done on a regular basis?
Okay. To my knowledge, EPA is currently not testing the soil for hydrocarbons. Our presence on island right now is really testing air for H2S and SO2. That is a question I can certainly take back in terms of that is a question that was asked to EPA, and we can certainly get back to folks on with that answer.
Okay. So let me see what else. I'm being told to pick up the pace. Thank you for the webinar. It's been a problem far too long, ready to be involved in any way. Thank you so much. Let's see. I do want to mention, okay, Makeda, you've got something to say. How are you? Makeda Okolo is with NOAA. Floor is yours.
Hi, good night, everyone. Thanks, Randall. Thanks, everyone, for organizing. I just wanted to mention, because I saw there was a question or a statement that Mama Ajwa posted in the chat about restoring Croix Lagoon. So NOAA has a fund in partnership with NIFWIF called the National Coastal Resilience Fund. And there is money for community planning efforts that are looking at restoration. So I just say that to everyone on the line for you to take a look at it. I put the link in the chat. Take a look at the requirements. If you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to get folks to talk to you about it. There is money to begin organizing as a community to begin restoring some of these areas that so many of us know and love and want to bring back. So I just offer that as a resource. I know the problems are many, but hopefully that's one thing that we can begin to look at.
Thank you so much. And we're so glad you're there on the forefront of this work. So we'll be in touch for sure. I saw a question as well regarding ownership of the land that Lime Tree is on. And I don't know that anybody can address that. There's, I know that a good portion of it is owned by some it was still owned by Havensa, and then I believe the ArcLight deal, they bought it, and then some is actually government land because it's reclaimed. Is that a question that you can answer?
Yeah, the land, the submerged land belongs to the people. The refinery and the backside company is like a built upon the wetland along and land. So there's submerged land there that belongs to the people. And the last document with Governor Map is within that document that I read, and I wrote an article about it. So there are land that by government, but it will be being leased out to the refinery to use. But the refinery itself and the other exactly on the wetland. And what Makeda mentioned about the restoration, it will never happen because it's so far, so gone in that particular area, because exactly on fill in land that was with the Croix Lagoon.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a lot of issue, not just with the refinery, but other issues there along the South Shore.
Okay, fabulous. I'm trying to go through. Thanks for being a good, humble moderator. Thank you very much. Elizabeth has her hand raised. Elizabeth?
I did, yes, and I just wanted to very quickly, Dave Klishner, if you know off the top of your head, there was a question in the Q&A, which I think is a really important one. I think as we all are very aware, there was significant groundwater aquifer contamination from Provenza, and I know that that was a Superfund site, and there was a long-standing reclamation effort to get the oil out of the aquifer. And the question was whether, it was from Karina, wanted to know how much oil is still remaining in the aquifer. And the information that I found online was 10 years old, and it cited 306,000 gallons of oil. So I was wondering if you had an updated figure for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. I do not have information on that. This is my first exposure to that kind of question. So I'd have to look into that and get back. I'm not aware that the aquifer is a Superfund site. So that's kind of news to me. So there is a Superfund site that is primarily with the groundwater remediation. I'm not aware of the only Superfund site on the islands that I'm aware of was Tutu Wellfield.
I'm sorry, it's been a long day. It's not Superfund, it's RCRA. I apologize.
Okay, that's helpful.
I put
I'll still have to look into it. Yeah.
I'll put the link into the chat.
Okay, and
Okay,
if you could get us that information, that would be fantastic. Now, I saw a post where someone asked, they just bought well water. Now they're scared. Is it safe? I think the answer would be it depends on which well it came from. And the Department of Health does have a water testing facility at the Department of Health, but my understanding is that they test for, I'll get the right term, biological contaminants, not for chemical contaminants. So unfortunately, that's where we're at.
They could call DPR now, and again, we do have businesses that test the water. She can get the water tested. So she can call DPR now and get the information. In terms of the well, I gave quick, not too far from the refinery, there's a business that have water, selling water. And the water underneath the ground, it moves all the time. So since 83, 82, they be pumping water from the ground, from Provenza. They're exactly pumping oil from the ground all the time. And what happens if you don't pump that, it began to move. So what happened with this business next to it, the oil move and contaminate the porcelain well, and they pay the porcelain millions of dollars. And not calling the company name. So I just trying to tell you, the water and the groundwater do not stay in one place. It's moved all over. So that's why they have to pump the water. For God know how long they pump the water, because the water is contaminated. And I have things in my office too as well that can give information on what they find in the water. This will be done by U.S. Geology Service. And I have that information in my office. If people want to see that some of the contamination in the well, beside the refinery, but actually have gas stations and so forth and so on that being contaminated. We only have about 3% fresh water in the world. So water here is very critical in the Virgin Islands. So right now, I have started to tell you, a lot of the water that we have and the groundwater is already being contaminated already.
Well,
and
thank you.
it will take years and years to pump the water out. And the water table is dropping low because there's so many pumping going on. So it's dropping much lower and much lower and much lower. Besides that, you haven't seawater coming in. We call it an intrusion coming into land because there's so many wells. So the seawater also is being contaminated. The fresh water That in itself our topic. Again, I got the information already. They have done a study, and we have seawater intrusion right now coming into wells. So your well within Salty, for example.
Well, thank you for that information, Alasi. So we're almost at the end, and there's one burning question that just popped up. And Elizabeth, this one is for you. What about the consent decree? I know I should probably ask Dave of the EPA as well, but what about the consent decree? Is that in effect since it transferred with the acquisition of the facility?
Thank you. I actually just answered that in text, but the short answer is, so I guess procedurally, so a modification was made to the consent decree under the Trump administration when Lime Tree came into the picture. And as of a few weeks ago, I believe it was around the end of April, the Department of Justice and EPA moved to enter the consent decree or officialize it essentially with the court. And my understanding is that it is still pending. Last time one of my colleagues, who's an attorney with NRDC, checked the docket, there was still a filing error. So it has not been entered yet. And I don't know if David wants to speak to this, and I hope this is okay, but something that C has been trying to get clear information on from EPA is which parts of the consent decree are currently applicable against Lime Tree. That is currently not clear, and we don't have full information at this time, but we are working to get a clear answer on that.
Thank you. Dave, you have anything to add?
I do not have any additional information to share. I'm not a lawyer by trade, but I work with plenty of them, and we're on calls all the time. So I can certainly raise it again. And I think we are there are things in motion, and we're trying to get some answers to that as well. So
Fantastic. Well, it has been a real pleasure. And of course, you know, getting to the end, it gets really good and we want to keep going, but we want to respect everyone's time. And thank you all for what you brought to this convening. Thank you to all of the people who stuck with the town hall for almost 2 hours. Particular thank you to David Bond for your phenomenal research and the way that you've shared it, and a special thank you to the Bushman. I hope you're training another one, Olasi Davis, who has been an advocate for the environment and for the people and for our culture for as long as I've known him. I think he and I are about the same age. So I just want to thank you all, and a special thank you to our partners in the St. Croix Foundation Nonprofit Consortium Environmental Sector. Special thanks to Deanna and her team. And we can't end the night without everybody wishing Jennifer Valulis a very, very happy birthday. Thank you for sharing your time, your birthday evening with us, Jennifer.
It was a great way to spend a birthday. I can't think of anything better. So thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
And with that, we're going to say good night, everyone. Thanks.
good night.
Night, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Summer. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yep, you're welcome.
And Luca.
Good night.
Good night. Good
Good night.
seeing you all.
Happy birthday, Jen. See you soon.